I remember the first time I heard the legend of Hollow Creek. It was a chilly autumn evening, and the leaves crunched beneath our feet as Mike and I walked home from school. He turned to me with a grin and said, "Did you hear about the old Miller house? They say it's haunted." Mike always had a flair for the dramatic, but there was something in his eyes that night that made me uneasy. Hollow Creek, our quaint little town in upstate New York, was known for its picturesque scenery and tight-knit community. But beneath its charming exterior, there lay dark tales that had been whispered for generations. The Miller house was the epicenter of these stories. Built in the late 1800s, it had been abandoned for decades. Locals claimed that strange lights could be seen in its windows at night, and the faint sound of children's laughter echoed through the air. Some said it was the spirits of the Miller family, who had perished in a fire under mysterious circumstances. I shrugged off Mike's story, laughing it away as a Halloween prank. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows. Hollow Creek was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone. It had a single main street lined with mom-and-pop shops, a diner where the locals gathered for coffee, and a park where children played. But there was always an undercurrent of unease, a sense that the past was never truly gone. One afternoon, Mike and I met up at the diner. The smell of fresh coffee and pancakes filled the air as we slid into a booth. "We should check out the Miller house," Mike said suddenly, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Think about it, man. If we could prove it's haunted, we'd be legends." I hesitated. "I don't know, Mike. It sounds risky. Plus, it's probably just a bunch of old stories." Before Mike could respond, Sarah, the town's unofficial historian, walked in. She was older than us by a few years and had an uncanny knowledge of Hollow Creek's history. "Talking about the Miller house, I see," she said, sliding into the booth next to us. "You boys should be careful. That place has a dark history." Sarah told us about the Miller family and the fire that had consumed their home. She spoke of strange symbols found in the ruins and how the townsfolk believed the Millers had dabbled in something sinister. "It's not just a ghost story," she warned. "Some things are best left alone." But Mike was undeterred. The more Sarah spoke, the more determined he became. And before I knew it, we had a plan to explore the Miller house that very night. The sun had barely set when we arrived at the Miller house. Its imposing silhouette loomed against the darkening sky, and the air grew colder as we approached. The front door creaked open with a touch, revealing a dark, musty interior. Armed with flashlights, we ventured inside. The house was a maze of decaying furniture and peeling wallpaper. Every creak and groan of the old wood sent shivers down my spine. As we explored, we found an old diary tucked away in a hidden compartment. The entries were dated over 100 years ago, detailing the life of Elizabeth Miller and her descent into madness. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed through the house, followed by a child's laughter. We froze, exchanging terrified glances. "Did you hear that?" Mike whispered, his face pale. Before I could answer, a shadowy figure appeared at the top of the stairs. My heart pounded as it slowly descended, each step echoing through the silent house. Who are you?" I stammered. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a man in tattered clothes. "Name's Jake," he said with a crooked smile. "I've been expecting you." Jake led us to a hidden room in the basement, where the walls were covered in strange symbols. "This is where it all happened," he said. "The Millers were trying to summon something dark." As we read through Elizabeth's diary, it became clear that she had been performing rituals to contact the spirit world. Her final entries spoke of a being she called the Watcher, who promised to reunite her with her lost children. But instead, it brought destruction. We felt a sudden drop in temperature, and the lights flickered. The air grew thick with an oppressive presence. "We need to leave," Sarah urged. "Now." But as we turned to go, the door slammed shut, trapping us inside. The symbols on the walls began to glow, and a chilling voice filled the room. "You cannot escape." We were plunged into darkness, the only light coming from our flashlights. The voice grew louder, and the room seemed to close in on us. "We have to break the circle," Jake shouted over the noise. "Destroy the symbols." With no other option, we began to frantically scrape at the glowing markings. As each symbol was destroyed, the room shook violently, and the voice grew more frantic. "You will not break the seal," it roared. In a final, desperate effort, we managed to obliterate the last symbol. The room was filled with a blinding light, and then everything went silent. We found ourselves outside the house, the night air cool and crisp. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The Miller house was demolished, and life in Hollow Creek slowly returned to normal. But we were forever changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. And then, one evening, I found a new entry in Elizabeth's diary, dated that very day. It spoke of a new family moving into the house, and how the Watcher would never be truly gone. As I read the final words, a cold breeze swept through the room, and I knew our ordeal was far from over. The true horror of Hollow Creek was just beginning. Life in Hollow Creek resumed its usual rhythm, but for us, nothing was the same. Mike became more withdrawn, spending long hours alone. Sarah dove into her research, determined to uncover more about the Miller family and the Watcher. As for me, every night brought restless sleep and vivid nightmares of that cursed house. One day, I decided to visit Sarah at the local library. The place was quiet, save for the rustling of pages and the soft hum of the air conditioner. I found her hunched over a stack of old newspapers, her face pale and eyes wide. "I think I've found something," she said, her voice trembling. Sarah had discovered a series of articles from the late 1800s about strange disappearances in Hollow Creek. The victims were all children, last seen playing near the Miller house. The articles hinted at a connection to an old folktale about the Watcher, a malevolent spirit that preyed on the innocent. "There's more," Sarah continued. "The disappearances stopped after the Miller house burned down. But now that it's been disturbed," her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do we do?" I asked, dreading the answer. Sarah looked up from the papers, determination in her eyes. "We need to find out how to banish the Watcher for good. And for that, we need to confront our fears." Just as we were piecing together the dark history of Hollow Creek, a new family moved into town. The Johnsons, a cheerful couple with 2 young children, had bought a house not far from where the Miller house once stood. Despite our warnings, they were eager to start their new life in Hollow Creek. One evening, I ran into Mr. Johnson at the local grocery store. He was a friendly man, quick to smile and full of enthusiasm about his family's new home. "You should come over for dinner," he said, patting me on the back. "We'd love to get to know our neighbors." I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. A few days later, I found myself sitting at the Johnsons' dinner table, trying to ignore the nagging feeling of dread. The children, Lily and Ben, were full of energy, their laughter filling the room. As the evening wore on, Mrs. Johnson mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Lily's been having these strange dreams," she said casually. "She keeps talking about a man who watches her from the window." My heart pounded. "Have you noticed anything unusual in the house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. Johnson laughed. "Just the usual creaks and groans of an old house. Nothing to worry about." But I knew better. I could see the unease in Mrs. Johnson's eyes. Something was very wrong. The next few weeks were a blur of research and sleepless nights. Sarah, Mike, and I spent every spare moment trying to unravel the mystery of the Watcher. We pored over old texts, interviewed elderly townsfolk, and even sought the help of a local paranormal investigator, Dr. Emily Harkins. Dr. Harkins was a no-nonsense woman with a wealth of experience in dealing with the supernatural. "This entity you're dealing with," she said during one of our late-night meetings, "is ancient and powerful. It feeds on fear and despair. If we are to banish it, we must break its connection to this world." She explained that the Watcher was bound to the physical remains of the Miller family and the artifacts associated with their rituals. "We need to find these items and destroy them," she said. "Only then can we hope to free Hollow Creek from its grasp." With renewed purpose, we set out to find the relics. Our first clue led us to the town cemetery, where the Miller family was buried. As we dug through old records, we discovered that Elizabeth Miller's grave had been disturbed multiple times over the years. It seemed someone or something was intent on keeping her restless spirit alive. Under the cover of darkness, we made our way to the cemetery. The night was eerily silent, and a thick fog clung to the ground. As we approached Elizabeth's grave, the air grew colder, and we could feel a malevolent presence watching us. "We have to be quick," Dr. Harkins whispered, handing us shovels. We worked in silence, the only sound the scrape of metal against earth. As we dug deeper, a sense of dread enveloped us, as if the ground itself was resisting our efforts. Finally, we unearthed a small, ornate box, covered in strange symbols. "This must be it," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "This is what binds the Watcher to our world." As we lifted the box from the ground, the fog thickened, and a chilling wind swept through the cemetery. Shadows moved at the edge of our vision, and the temperature plummeted. "We need to destroy it," Dr. Harkins urged. "Now!" Back at Sarah's house, we prepared for the final confrontation. Dr. Harkins had devised a ritual to sever the connection between the Watcher and the Miller family. "This will be dangerous," she warned, "but it's our only chance." We gathered in a circle, the box at the center. Dr. Harkins began to chant, her voice steady and strong. As the ritual progressed, the air grew heavy, and the room seemed to darken. Shadows danced on the walls, and a low, menacing growl echoed around us. Suddenly, the box shook violently, and a dark mist began to seep from its seams. "Hold on," Dr. Harkins shouted, her voice strained. "We're almost there." But then, the door slammed open, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Jake, his eyes wild and filled with terror. "You have to stop," he screamed. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Jake's sudden appearance threw us into chaos. The dark mist swirled around him, and his face twisted in agony. "It's too late," he gasped. "The Watcher, it's here." The room erupted in a maelstrom of wind and darkness. We were thrown to the ground, and the shadows coalesced into a towering figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. "You cannot escape me," it hissed, its voice like the rustle of dead leaves. Dr. Harkins struggled to her feet, her face pale but determined. "We have to finish the ritual," she shouted. "It's our only hope." With renewed resolve, we joined hands and continued the chant. The Watcher roared in fury, its form writhing as the ritual took hold. The box shook violently, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, the room was silent. The box lay shattered on the floor, and the oppressive presence was gone. We were exhausted but alive. The Watcher had been banished, and Hollow Creek was finally free. In the days that followed, the town slowly returned to normal. The Johnsons decided to stay, their home now free of the malevolent spirit. Mike, Sarah, and I remained close, bound by our shared ordeal. And while the nightmares still lingered, we took comfort in knowing that we had faced our fears and emerged victorious. But as I sat in my quiet house one evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that our victory was not as complete as it seemed. I glanced at Elizabeth's diary, now safely locked away, and wondered what other secrets it held. The final entry had spoken of a new beginning, a fresh start for Hollow Creek. But as I closed the book, I couldn't help but notice the faint sound of children's laughter drifting through the night air, and I knew that some things are never truly gone. I never believed in ghosts or any of those eerie tales passed down through generations, stories meant to scare children into behaving. But that was before I met Natalie, and before the events that unfolded in the sleepy town of Ravenwood. This is not just a story of love, but a journey into the unknown, where reality intertwines with the supernatural, and where the past refuses to stay buried. My name is Jack Sullivan, and I've lived in Ravenwood all my life. It's a small town in Massachusetts, one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and nothing much ever happens. At least, that's what I thought until last summer. Ravenwood is the kind of town where traditions run deep, and legends are taken seriously. The local diner, Pete's Place, was a favorite spot for gossip, and lately, all anyone could talk about was the White Lady. It was said she haunted the old bridge at the edge of town, a place where many accidents had occurred over the years. People claimed to have seen her late at night, a spectral figure in white, standing by the roadside. It started with whispers. People talked about the return of the White Lady, a local legend about a woman who died tragically and was said to haunt the outskirts of town. I dismissed it as just another ghost story, but then I saw her. One late night, driving back from a friend's house, I caught a glimpse of a figure in white standing by the old bridge. She disappeared as quickly as she appeared, leaving me with a chill down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that what I had seen was real, and it marked the beginning of a series of events that would change my life forever. Life went on, and I soon met Natalie, a newcomer to Ravenwood. She was everything I wasn't: bold, curious, and unafraid to dig into the town's secrets. We quickly became inseparable. Natalie had moved to Ravenwood to escape a past she rarely spoke of, and I found solace in her adventurous spirit. Our evenings were spent exploring the woods and abandoned buildings that dotted the outskirts of town, places I had always been too afraid to venture alone. As our relationship blossomed, so did the strange occurrences. Doors would creak open on their own, cold spots would appear in rooms, and we both felt an unshakable sense of being watched. Natalie was fascinated by these events, while I grew increasingly uneasy. She believed that the paranormal activity was connected to the White Lady and was determined to uncover the truth. One evening, as we sat in my living room, Natalie turned to me, her eyes wide with excitement. "Jack, we need to find out more about the White Lady. There's something she wants us to know." Her determination was infectious, and despite my reservations, I agreed to help her investigate. Little did I know, this decision would lead us down a path filled with danger and revelations we could never have imagined. We started our investigation at the town library, digging through old records and newspapers. It turned out that the legend of the White Lady dated back to the early 1800s. Her name was Margaret Wilkins, a young woman who drowned in the river under mysterious circumstances. Some said she was murdered by her lover. Others believed she took her own life after a tragic heartbreak. The more we uncovered, the more we realized how deeply intertwined Margaret's story was with the history of Ravenwood. Natalie found a faded photograph of Margaret, and as she held it up, a cold breeze swept through the library. "Jack, look at this," she whispered, pointing to the background of the photo. There, in the shadows, was a figure that looked eerily familiar. It was the same bridge where I had seen the apparition. The connection sent shivers down my spine, and I knew we were on the right track. Our research led us to visit elderly residents who remembered stories passed down from their grandparents. We met Mrs. Whitaker, who lived in a creaky old house filled with relics from the past. "Margaret's spirit is restless," she told us in a trembling voice. "She's searching for something, or someone." Her words lingered with us, adding urgency to our quest to uncover the truth. As we delved deeper, the supernatural occurrences intensified. One night, Natalie woke up screaming, claiming she saw Margaret standing at the foot of our bed. Our once happy home turned into a place of fear and tension. We argued more, the stress of our findings weighing heavily on us. The walls seemed to close in on us, the very air we breathed thick with an unseen presence. "I can't do this anymore, Jack," Natalie said one night, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't just a story. It's real, and it's tearing us apart." Her fear mirrored my own, but I was determined to see it through. I couldn't shake the feeling that solving Margaret's mystery was the key to ending the haunting. In our darkest moments, we found solace in each other. Natalie's courage and determination became a beacon of hope. We decided to push forward, no matter the cost. Our love was tested in ways we never expected, and it was during these times of adversity that we truly understood the depth of our bond. In our desperation, we visited an old historian who had lived in Ravenwood his entire life. He revealed a shocking truth. Margaret was my great-great-grandmother. She had been involved in a forbidden love affair and was betrayed by her lover, who was also Natalie's ancestor. The curse was tied to our bloodlines, a tragic cycle doomed to repeat itself. This revelation was like a punch to the gut, leaving us reeling with the implications. Thank you for watching our stories. Did you enjoy it? What do you think could have happened next? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more stories based on real-life events, click on the video appearing on your screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. See you in the next video.